Okay, so the intro video showed you what the priority tool does, and this video will show you how it does what it does, how you complete the spreadsheet. So you add your list of markets into this box here, and you'll recall they can be customer markets or product markets or end-use markets. And you can add a maximum of 8 markets in this version. I'm going to use the animal health customer categories that we looked at in the first video, but I should say I'm going to use fictional inputs to demonstrate the tool, so the output will have no resemblance to the real markets. As you add to the list, you'll see that these input boxes appear below. Now, before we get to those, we need to decide how we are going to size the markets. Now, this is typically expressed as the total addressable market, which is the total revenue available for your product or service. And you can see you have a choice of 3 different currencies for that option. But you could size the market in terms of total number of potential customers or total number of units sold. Now, I tend not to use this scaling option when I'm doing it just for myself because I know what scaling I'm using. But if you're collaborating or sharing or presenting this data, then it's good practice to let people know if you're talking in millions or thousands or units or whatever measure you're using. So we set the market size criteria, and once we've done that, we go down to the input boxes. And the market name is added automatically from the list, and the market size criteria you have chosen is also added here. If you select the scaling option, it will appear here. Now, the first input required is the market size number, and I've chosen number of potential customers in thousands, so let's just put in 100. On the left of the input table, there are 5 factors that drive the attractiveness of a market. They're all pretty self-explanatory, but let's quickly run through them. The market growth rate is how quickly the market is growing relative to the broader market or the economy in general. Market size is how big the market is, which is pretty subjective and based on your definition of what constitutes a big market for your business. Competitive intensity is a measure of how many competitors are chasing the same business and how aggressive they are. Market stability is an environmental measure, and this is a measure of how volatile is the market. Do we think this is a good long-term bet for us? And finally, demand for your product or service is about the amount and frequency of your product that is demanded by this market. Now, currently, the relative weighting of each attractiveness factor is equal, and we're going to leave it that way for now, but we will come back to it before we end this video. So now you rate each attractiveness factor for the market in question using these drop-down lists. They are essentially a 5-point scale, but presented in a more descriptive way. And again, they're all subjective, so you have to apply them consistently. Whatever large market size or high market growth rate means to you, then use that across all the markets. And as this tool is measuring relative attractiveness, we don't need to worry about strict or absolute definitions, just as long as you're always consistent. So when you've completed the attractiveness ratings, you move over to the competitive strength table. Now, this is completed in the same way, but obviously the 5 factors are different. Relative market share is how much market share you currently have in this market relative to the business with the highest market share. Or if you happen to be the one with the highest market share, then it's relative to the second highest. Brand strength is your brand or product's reputation in the market from your customer's perspective. Customer closeness is about how well you know the target customers, and just as importantly, how well they know you. Can you reach them? Will they take your call? Relative product performance is an honest assessment of how your product performance compares to your competitor's offering. Do you really have a competitive advantage in terms of product performance, or are you in the middle of the pack, or are you maybe substandard even? When it comes to your competitors, you need to have an honest assessment of where you sit. And finally, ability to serve. Do you have the infrastructure, the delivery points, the customer service, the production capacity, and so on to meet or exceed your customers' expectations? So once you've understood those, we rate them as we did for the attractiveness factors. And again, it's pretty much a 5-point scale that again is pretty subjective. So once more, consistency is the key. Now, when you've completed the attractiveness and strength tables for every market, you will have a completed priority chart that looks something like this. Now, I mentioned we'd come back to the relative importance scores. If you want to change the relative importance of any factor, you simply change these numbers here, where 10 is the most important and 1 is the least important. So in this example, by changing the numbers like this, we increase the weighting of the market growth rate to 33%, while demand for your product or service drops to a weighting of around 7%, which means that market growth rate will count nearly 5 times more than demand for your product or service in assessing the attractiveness of this market. Now, some people adjust these ratings at the very start of the evaluation, others complete the chart first and then adjust the weighting subsequently, and some people never bother changing it at all because it sometimes doesn't make that much difference. Either way, you only have to change the weighting for the first table and the new weightings will carry down to all of the others. If you adjust the competitive strength factors weighting, they will also carry down to the markets below. But if you want to or need to, you can adjust the business strength weightings for specific markets here, which is sometimes needed when particular markets have a very different view of what's most important to them. But we really are getting into the fine tuning at this point. So that's the tool. You've got enough information to get stuck in, play around with it, use it, and just get in touch with me if you have any questions.